Today we're going to be discussing sunlight as a biological signal using peer-reviewed science to give a framework for using light intelligently. We're going to cover morning timing, midday dosing, and the evening transition across circadian biology, vitamin D physiology, and skin health. There are three distinct windows we're going to cover: the morning window, the midday window, and the evening window. The morning window is going to signal your circadian rhythm to wake you up. Midday, you're going to get higher UV exposure to synthesize vitamin D. And in the evening, it's going to signal you that it's time to wind down and go to bed. Part one of this presentation is going to be foundations of why light timing is a biological input and not something to be played with or looked at as something unserious. Why sunlight matters. Humans evolved under bright outdoor light dark cycles with very strong, highly predictable contrast between day and night. Bright days, very dark nights. Modern indoor living compresses daytime light exposure to a fraction of historical norms, and it extends your artificial light exposure deep into the night. Think using your phone, watching TV late at night, or even just having the lights on in your house at night when it's dark outside. This mismatch affects sleep architecture, mood regulation, daytime alertness, and the precision of your circadian timing. The fix is not avoiding light, it's restoring the natural pattern of bright days and dark nights. So outdoor light is going to dwarf typical indoor lighting. This is going to be the basis of light's power as a circadian cue. Sunlight is not only one thing. There's three important parts of sunlight. First being visible light, which is detectable by the human eye, and it's acted on by the circadian system. This is the domain input for your biological clock setting. Next is UVB, shorter wavelength, the central driver of cutaneous vitamin D synthesis and the main contributor to sunburn risk. Finally, UVA, longer wavelength, penetrating deeper and can trigger nitric oxide related vascular effects in skin. Sunlight is a bundle of distinct signals layered together, and treating it as an undifferentiated exposure misses why timing and dosing is so important. Correct timing plus correct dosing creates a benefit. Neither alone is sufficient. Too little daylight weakens your circadian signaling with downstream effects on sleep and mood. Too much UV increases skin damage risk independent of any circadian or vitamin D benefit. The body clock from the eye to the cell works like this. Light will hit your intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells in your retina and travel down via the retinohypothalamic tract to your suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is in your hypothalamus. It will synchronize, and your peripheral clocks body-wide will become aligned. In depth, the circadian system organizes physiology across an approximately 24-hour cycle, coordinating thousands of processes. Sleep timing, hormone secretion, core body temperature, and alertness all follow predictable daily rhythms set by this clock. Specialized retinal cells called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells detect ambient light independently of the rods and cones used for vision. These cells signal directly to the SCN in the hypothalamus, the master pacemaker that synchronizes clocks throughout the body, from liver muscles to skin. Morning light, anchoring the circadian clock for sleep, alertness, and hormonal timing. Morning outdoor light drives a phase advance. The internal clock will shift so that sleepiness and waking both occur earlier. This is the dominant mechanism by which early light stabilizes a consistent sleep-wake schedule night after night. Intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells are sensitive to short wavelength blue shifted light, which is abundant in the diffuse sky, even in shade, meaning direct sun exposure to the eyes is not required. The response is dose dependent. More intensity and exposure earlier after waking will produce a stronger advanced signal. People with delayed circadian phases, night owls, or those with social jet lag, benefit most from consistent morning outdoor exposure. Cortisol, alertness, and the morning cascade. Cortisol follows a strong circadian rhythm, peaking naturally 30 to 45 minutes after waking, a pattern called the cortisol awakening response. Morning light reinforces the circadian amplitude of this response, helping the brain receive a clear signal that the biological day has begun. A well-timed cortisol awakening response is associated with better energy mobilization, sharper alertness, and improved working memory in the first half of the day. Disrupted light-dark cycles will blunt the cortisol awakening response, partially explaining why night shift workers and jet-lagged individuals will feel cognitively impaired even after sufficient sleep hours. Morning light for mood and sleep. Mood regulation. Daytime light is a recognized therapeutic input in seasonal affective disorder and non-seasonal depression. Even subclinical mood dips correlate with reduced outdoor light exposure. Downstream sleep quality. Better morning light correlates with earlier dim light melatonin onset and improved sleep efficiency. Strong days tend to create better nights via clock amplitude. Movement synergy. Morning walks add low intensity movement to the light signal. The combination improves glucose handling, mood, and long term adherence to the habit, more so than either alone. Cloudy days definitely still count because overcast outdoor light will always dwarf typical indoor lighting. A cloudy morning walk will still deliver meaningful circadian input regardless of what you may visually see compared to a sunny day. Consistency will always beat waiting for the sun. Practical application for morning light. There's no single universal prescription. The science supports principles, not simple rigidity. Get outside within 30 to 60 minutes of waking. This window will capture the steepest phase advancing portion of the light sensitivity curve. Face the sky without directly staring at the sun. Indirect sky exposure through the eyes is sufficient. Glasses and contacts are fine, but windows will block most UV rays. If you can get outside without glasses, I recommend it though. 5 to 30 plus minutes depending on the conditions. On bright, clear days, 5 to 10 minutes is good enough. On overcast days or in the winter, 20 to 30 minutes is enough to compensate for lower intensity. Consistency over duration. A 15-minute walk every single morning will build a stronger circadian amplitude than an occasional 45-minute walk. And an especially important note for the night owls and night shift workers is that the earlier your target sleep schedule, the more critical consistent morning light becomes to pull the clock forward. Midday sun, UVB, vitamin D synthesis, tanning physiology, and the non-burning rule. Why midday is the vitamin D window? UVB drives the conversion of 7-dehydrocholesterol in the skin to pre-vitamin D3, but UVB only reaches the Earth's surface in meaningful amounts when the sun is high enough in the sky. At low solar angles, the atmosphere absorbs most of the incoming UVB before it reaches you. Visible light will still arrive, but UVB will not. Around solar noon, the path length through the atmosphere is shortest, so UVB intensity peaks, and skin synthesis efficiency is the highest, making this the most productive window in most conditions. A simple field test. If your shadow is shorter than your height, meaningful UVB is likely present. If it's taller, UVB is likely not reaching you. Season, latitude, cloud cover, altitude, pollution, and clothing all modify this basic equation. The vitamin D synthesis pathway. UVB is going to hit the skin. 7-dehydrocholesterol, which is stored in keratinocytes and fibroblasts, will absorb UVB photons. Peak absorption 295 to 300 nanometers. Next, pre-vitamin D3 will be formed. Photoisomerization will convert 7-DHC to pre-vitamin D3. This step is rapid and sunlight dependent with no enzymes required. Thermal conversion will then create D3. Body heat, which is your skin temperature, will slowly convert pre-vitamin D3 to cholecalciferol, which is vitamin D3, over the following hours. This step limits the acute production rate. Next is liver hydroxylation. Vitamin D3 will travel to the liver, where CYP2R1 will convert it to 25-hydroxyvitamin D, 25-OHD, the storage and measurement form, the serum vitamin D level. Finally, kidney activation. CYP27B1 in the kidneys and other tissues will convert 25-OHD to the active hormone 125-OH2D, or calcitriol, which will bind to nuclear vitamin D receptors throughout the body. Dose, skin tone, and the plateau effect. Synthesis plateaus. Vitamin D production peaks quickly and then plateaus. Continued UV exposure beyond that point degrades pre-vitamin D3 and adds to skin damage without adding vitamin D. Short bursts are more efficient than long sessions. Melanin is a UV filter, as it will reduce UVB penetration into the deeper skin layers. Darker Fitzpatrick skin types generally need longer or more intense midday exposure to produce equivalent vitamin D output. This is biology, not pathology. And age will also reduce efficiency. Skin 7-DHC concentration declines with age. A 70-year-old will produce roughly 25% of the vitamin D from equivalent UVB exposure compared to a young adult. This compounds with reduced outdoor time and clothing coverage. Key distinction I want to make at the beginning before we start the physiology of tanning is that a tan is the skin's damage mitigation response. Pursuing maximal tanning as a health goal misunderstands biology and is not accurate. The goal is adequate vitamin D synthesis and circadian signaling, not visible pigmentation depth. Tanning is an appearance goal, a looks goal, not a health goal. A tan is a protective melanin response. The skin increases melanogenesis and keratinocytes to reduce future UV penetration depth, protecting DNA and dividing basal layer cells. Immediate pigment darkening, IPD, occurs within minutes and is driven by UVA oxidizing existing melanin. It fades within hours and provides minimal UV protection. Delayed tanning will peak 3 to 5 days after exposure and reflect new melanin synthesis. This is more durable protection and what most people refer to as a tan. As a tan deepens, it acts as a natural UV filter that reduces both further skin damage and further vitamin D synthesis efficiency. A darker tan is not a sign of increasing vitamin D benefit. A tan does not prevent cumulative UV damage. It reduces the rate of additional damage, but repeated UV stress that induces tanning still accumulates DNA mutations over time. Sunburn is the line that cannot be crossed. It is an acute skin injury, and every burn event increases cumulative DNA mutation load in skin cells and contributes to long-term cancer risk. There is no such thing as a beneficial sunburn. UVB causes cyclobutane pyrimidine dimers in DNA, direct photoproducts that, if not repaired by nucleotide excision repair enzymes, become mutations during subsequent cell division. Erythema, which is redness or sunburn, appears 6 to 24 hours after overexposure and signals that the threshold for acute injury has already been exceeded. Avoiding visible redness is not sufficient. Subclinical DNA damage accumulates before the skin even turns red. Melanoma and non-melanoma skin cancers have dose-response relationships with cumulative UV and individual burn history. The risk compounds over lifetime. Photoaging, which is accelerated wrinkling, dyspigmentation, loss of skin elasticity, is a parallel UV consequence driven by UVA-induced oxidative damage to collagen and elastin, separate from vitamin D and circadian benefits. A health-oriented sunlight strategy must explicitly be non-burning. This is non-negotiable. If you are burning, you're harming your health. UVA, nitric oxide, and vascular tone. Skin stores nitrogen-containing species in the epidermis. UVA irradiation photolytically releases nitric oxide from these stores into the circulation. Nitric oxide is a potent endothelium-derived vasodilator. It relaxes smooth muscle in blood vessel walls, transiently increasing vessel diameter and lowering blood pressure. Several human studies document that acute reductions in blood pressure follow realistic UVA exposure, at least partly independent of vitamin D status. The mechanism is distinct from vitamin D. It operates within minutes of UVA exposure, not the hours to days required for tanning. Population-level epidemiology shows an inverse association between latitude and cardiovascular mortality, which may partially reflect this UVA nitric oxide pathway, though many confounders apply. The strongest claim is that UVA can acutely affect vascular tone. Long-term cardiovascular outcomes remain under study and are influenced by behavior, diet, and many other variables. And finally, evening light, twilight timing, melatonin onset, and protecting your biological night. Natural twilight is dim, redshifted, and part of a continuous day-night signal the circadian system has tracked across evolutionary time. As solar angle decreases towards dusk, the ratio of shorter to longer wavelengths shifts. The circadian system detects this and uses it as a timing cue for the start of biological night. Outdoor dusk exposure is not the same as artificial bright light at night. Twilight, which is 1 to 100 lux outdoors, is vastly dimmer than the indoor lighting used in most homes in the evening, which is 200 to 500 lux. The more robust circadian signal you built during the morning and midday from light, the more precisely the system will respond to the twilight transition. The amplitude of your daytime rhythm determines the sharpness of your evening drop-off. Evening outdoor walks are primarily useful as a behavioral transition tool. They signal the end of the active waking day to your body and your mind, and it's a good way to burn additional calories before heading to bed. It's great for your metabolic health. Melatonin timing and light sensitivity. Melatonin onset typically occurs 2 to 3 hours before habitual sleep time and is one of the most reliable markers of circadian phase. Evening and nighttime light, especially short wavelength lights that are rich in blue light, suppresses melatonin secretion by signaling the suprachiasmatic nucleus that day continues, delaying both melatonin onset and the onset of sleepiness. This circadian system is especially sensitive to light in the first half of the night. Even low doses of blue-enriched light during this window can produce measurable melatonin suppression. A strong daytime light-dark contrast may reduce evening light sensitivity, providing some buffering, but this does not make excessive nighttime light harmless. Dim your indoor lights after sunset. use warmer artificial light in the evening, reduce your screen brightness, and consider blue light classes if bright screens before bed are unavoidable, like if you have to study. This is a timeline of your melatonin throughout the day. A practical application to evening light. Get outside around dusk if you can. Even a 10-minute walk is going to provide a behavioral transition cue and reinforce the day end signal without any meaningful UV exposure. You don't have to worry about getting burned at night. Dim your indoor lighting after sunset so you're not mimicking daytime light in your environment. Reduce your screen brightness for the same reason. Prioritize morning light over your evening management. A well-anchored morning clock will build some resilience to your evening light exposure. You can have more freedom with your evenings if you have a healthy morning. The morning signal is the primary lever, and your evening management amplifies it, but it can also damage it. Evening sun will not synthesize vitamin D. It's a very important point, so you're not going to get burned in the evening either. This is my daily sunlight model. So in the morning, you're going to anchor your clock, phase advance your circadian timing, reinforce the cortisol awakening response, and set the melatonin offset for the night by getting outside within 30 to 60 minutes of waking. In the midday, you're going to intelligently dose your UV, brief non-burning UV exposure when solar angle permits it, to synthesize vitamin D. This is also good for the UVA nitric oxide vascular pathway, and you need to stop before any redness, pinkness, or burning occurs. I like to read when I walk outside during midday. I get a good 20-30 pages in, I'm inside, I'm good. And then in the evening, you will signal the day's end with a twilight walk as behavioral transition, dim your indoor lights progressively after sunset, reduce blue shifted screen exposure, and protect your biological night by doing these things. This is an evidence-based benefit summary about using sunlight intelligently. There are physical benefits, mental and emotional benefits, and hormonal and circadian benefits, like we have mentioned. Sunlight across the lifespan. In older adults, skin 7-DHC will decline with age, which is going to reduce vitamin D synthesis efficiency by up to 75%. Sleep architecture becomes shallower and circadian amplitude decreases. Structured morning light exposure and vitamin D testing will become very important. For darker skin types, higher melanin content requires longer UVB exposure for vitamin D synthesis. For athletes and high exercisers, training indoors or early or late in the day can produce circadian mismatch and suboptimal recovery rhythms. Morning light anchoring and attention to vitamin D status are high return on investment interventions for training populations. And night shift workers. Chronic circadian misalignment in certain shift workers are associated with metabolic, cardiovascular, and psychiatric risk. Strategic light use, morning light on rest days, darkness during sleep periods can partially mitigate this disruption. The main takeaways are that sunlight is a multi-signal input. There are 3 windows that do different jobs. Intelligent dosing and non-burning are non-negotiable, and you need to think in rhythms, not minutes.